Hello, everyone. My name is Marc Caputo. I'm a White House correspondent for Axios, and it's really an honor to be able to moderate this panel. Or perhaps it's a little embarrassing because of the accomplishment of the men who are next to me. I'm sort of pale in comparison to what these men have achieved. This panel is going to explore how young men can forge authentic bonds across socioeconomic, cultural, and racial divides. And that's through shared purpose and a common sense of ideals. We're going to examine successful models, the military, sports, public service, local service, that unite men across diverse backgrounds and these different cultural areas. Now, one of the important aspects of examining this is to provide solutions. One of the things that you'll notice in the discussions throughout is things seem kind of bleak for young men. And what we want to do is sort of drill down on sort of solutions and strategic ways and applied lessons that can be used for strategies going forward. So to introduce my panel, to my left is Senator Ruben Gallego from Arizona. He is the son of immigrants, an author, also a former Marine Corps. What rank did you attain? Former Marine Corps corporal in one of the hardest hit areas of Iraq during the Iraq War. He then went on in Arizona to go to Harvard University. After serving, he was then elected to the United States House and ultimately to the United States Senate. To the left of him is Antong Lucky. He's the president and CEO of Urban Specialists in Dallas. Last night when we met, he did say that his publicist prefers that he always be introduced as an author, so let me skip to that first. He's the author of 2 books, one that's been printed so far, A Redemptive Path Forward from Incarceration to a Life of Activism, and the forthcoming book, Leading the Fatherless to Faith, an in-depth look into the crisis of fatherlessness and its impact. As you can tell by the title, former gang member, served his time in prison and came out and decided to give back to the community, and the lessons he's learned we're going to hear about momentarily. To the left of him, Wynn Smiley is the Chief Executive Officer of the Alpha Tau Omega Fraternity, ATO. It leads 130 chapters across the United States. 160,000 alumni and affiliated organizations are part of the ATO Educational Foundation. They're focused on housing and finance. He's a recognized leader in the interfraternity community. Wynn is known for advocacy of fraternity life and beyond. And then, last but not least, Colonel Lance Van Zandt, U.S. Army retired, a seasoned military leader with extensive experience, also combat experience as well in Iraq. Throughout his career, he served in key leadership positions, shaping defense initiatives, mentoring the next generation of military professionals, and since retiring, Colonel Van Zandt continues to contribute his expertise to Veterans Affairs, national security discussions, also has a book coming out soon. About a year? I won't give away the title. So in focusing this panel, we wanted to kind of draw on these lessons. So let me draw on the 2 military men here. Drawing from your experience in military service, how do shared commitments and common goals foster a sense of brotherhood and purpose among men from different backgrounds? When you get all of these men together with this shared common purpose, what do you see? What do you learn? What does that look like? Senator.
Well, I'm trying to go back, and I just had my 20-year reunion with my Marines, and the Marine Corps birthday is coming up for 250th birthday, so happy birthday to all Marines. So I think what it teaches you is a common goal and the idea of a common good and working together to that. So much of this world is very individualistic, and to some degree men, at first are taught to be individuals, but don't understand the idea that you have to be part of this kind of greater good. And you're kind of forged, especially in combat, to do that. You have to understand yourself. You have to understand the idea of sacrifice, because you are going to sacrifice, whether it is physical sacrifice, mental sacrifice, spiritual sacrifice, or just general your time away from just normal society. And you don't think about it, but it starts at boot camp. Marine Corps boot camp is pretty hard. They strip you down. They take away all ability for you to speak to anybody outside of your, your company. And they try to, instill this idea of joint success, and that you as an individual don't matter. What matters is how is the rest of the group doing, and it forges your mentality going forward, right? And when I talk about things, for example, I rarely use the word "I," and I'm pretty sure Lieutenant Colonel will say the same thing. So like even when I do something very well, I say "we," right? Because I'm still stuck in this mentality that whatever I'm doing for this kind of greater good. And then when the stuff really hits the fan in combat, it's actually when it really matters. Because if you think of yourself as an individual, the likelihood of you taking, that house or taking that hill is going to be very slim. When you start thinking about how you're going to actively hurt these guys, these men that you've been training with forever, who are trusting you, who think and believe in you, and they're going to die for you, and you're willing to die for them, you're less likely to kind of shrink from that moment. And it's something that it just doesn't change when you leave the Marines or the military. It's something that carries over into, I think the rest of real, what I call the real life. And it certainly has made a big difference for me about how I approach things in general.
Colonel.
Yeah, I'll start off by saying, I grew up in a two-parent household. Had a mom, a dad, then a mom and a stepdad that raised me through my formative years. But all during that time, I was playing sports, I was involved in teams and community. Went off to college, the military academy, and it's the same thing. You can't isolate yourself in a place like that. You will be found. Because that's actually a question I asked before I went. It's like, hey, can I just sneak through and not really get noticed by the upperclassmen? It's impossible. You're going to be a part of a team, a club, a sport, etc. Right? And then I graduated and was thrust right into the military. And I've always been a part of a team since then. And so, I was sharing before the panel, part of that is I took it for, I think what was normal for me, I took for granted. That I was part of a community that looked out for each other my entire life, going up through my career. And, let's talk about the enemy. Like, the enemy has a vote, right? And if the enemy can isolate me, so in the military, we always travel in battle buddies. Hey, who's your battle buddy? Who's going to be with you wherever you go? And that's more of a physical protection to look out for one another. But it also keeps you from emotional, mental, spiritual harm as well. Particularly, let's look at a life and spiritual metaphor with the military metaphor. Because if I can isolate you, if I can outnumber you, if I can gain an asymmetric advantage over you, then I can destroy you, right? And especially if I keep you from getting reinforcements. It's the same way in life, but correspondingly, if I do have reinforcements, if I'm part of a team, if I'm part of a community, then I can fend off the enemy, right? And it may be a physical enemy, it may be that emotional harm that people go through, spiritual. I'll share here because there's a lot of scripture that backs it up, right? So, going all the way back to Genesis, God created man to not be alone. Ecclesiastics, two are better than one. So one falls, the other one help pick him back up again. Proverbs, as iron sharpens iron, so does one man sharpen another, right? We all know that, right? Moving on to Acts, early believers, they lived together in community, they ate together, they shared burdens together. And then going to, Romans, one of the ones we can all relate to, is the body with many parts, right? All the diverse things that our hands, our feet, the different parts of the body do, but they come together as community and allow us to be stronger together. And several of the other panels shared this as well, but it's the principle of, and the senator did just now, but it's the principle of serving something greater than you. And being a part of a team isn't just enough, because some teams you might be a gang, right? It might be headed in the wrong direction. But it's serving something greater than you and not having those, selfish desires leading your efforts. It's the we, not the I, again, as the senator shared.
Good transition to Antoine. You grew up in a single family or single parent household. You wound up going to prison. You mentor young men who probably experience this sense of isolation, the opposite of what the colonel is talking about. So how can men facing these adversities find this sort of sense of purpose and this sense of community and these connections that they either don't have when they're born or when they're raised or that they face now.
Thank you. I think that's good. I think I start off by saying that a great sage said this, and you quote me: "The tragedy of good advice is that it's born out of bad judgment." It's a great sage said that.
I mentioned that to him last night. Great advice is born of bad judgment. I give great advice because I have displayed such bad judgment.
Yeah, that was our
in the past.
conversation last night. But I think for me, growing up in a single-family home, my father was sentenced to prison when I was 9 months. He ultimately did 37 years. I applied all of my talents into school. I was a talented, gifted student. I was a straight-A student. But growing up in the community where I grew up in, smart kids get bullied. I learned that quick. And so for me, I had to have a dual personality where at school I was a great kid, but then the environment that I was in said that I had to be another way. There wasn't no positive men in my community, right? And so I thought I was doing a great job by starting a gang, looking for family and friends and all that good stuff. But I was sadly mistaken. That wasn't the right idea to do. That ultimately led me to prison, where in prison I found a mentor, older inmate who recognized me, who made me, for the first time in my life, made me feel seen and heard. This guy approached me and he said to me, his exact words were to me was, "Little brother," and I was probably 19 years old. He said, "Little brother, I see all these young men in here follow you. They look up to you. They fall out of place. They do whatever you ask them to do." Something I hadn't realized. He said, "But let me tell you something." He said, "If you have within you the ability to lead these guys to do wrong, within you exists the same ability to lead them to do right." He said, "You're a leader." And I had never looked at that like that. And from that day forward, he began to help me understand the cognitive distortions that I had embraced growing up in my environment. He helped me to unlearn a lot of the things that I had learned in my environment, from toxic masculinity to just the whole idea of myself. And as I began to shed back all of those things that led me to prison, in me was born this whole passion to help other young men not make the same mistake. So I think to answer your question, I would say this for anybody who is trying to help and build connection with young people, we have to approach that without judgment. Oftentimes with us in the room, we have a lot of judgment that we have when we're trying to help some people, and that judgment creates barriers, right? Because adults have this ability not to remember they were once teenagers, they were once lonely, they were once isolated, they didn't have all the answers. So I think when we begin to approach and meet young people where they at, where they are, and walk with them, it's kind of like in the Army. When we have young people, we can say, "Let me walk you through what you're dealing with." Because in this fast-paced world, we are all dealing with everything that's happening in our life, and we have forgotten young men and also young women who are searching for a better path.
Wynn, you're CEO of ATO, the ATO Foundation?
Yes.
Right? Give us an idea in your organization and organizations like it, and fraternities generally, where character and commitment are prioritized.
Yes.
What role do those organizations play in people's lives? For Wynn, actually.
Okay.
Yeah. I think that, and the senator had mentioned earlier that when he talked about this issue of young men isolation a few probably years ago, if then, people would look at him like, "What are you talking about?" And I would say that fraternity has been watching this dynamic for years, and it's only recently, to our great delight, that it's getting traction, because it is truly an issue that and I've been doing this for a few years.
How many years?
30. So, a long time. Bullet train. We can certainly see a difference. I can see a difference from when I first started in how 18-year-olds matriculating into college interacted with each other versus their attitudes coming into college today. And I think Richard Reeves really speaks to this directly in that, especially K through 12 in education, boys are being treated differently than they used to be. There aren't not as, and this was mentioned in an earlier panel, there aren't as many women teachers, and God bless the women teachers out there. They do a wonderful job, but K through 8 in particular.
I think that there aren't as many men teachers.
I'm sorry, not as many men.
Yeah, because the problem is there aren't as many male teachers as there used to be.
Yes, thank you. Yes, absolutely. Thank you. God bless the women teachers because they do a great job, but there are fewer men teachers, especially K through 8, and so boys have fewer role models, and they are getting either through education or social media or television shows that they are lesser than. They are marginalized, and I don't really like that word, but that's what they're feeling. And so when they come to college, they get that in many cases on turbocharge. So even student orientation, depending on who does the student orientation and what campus, they're hearing things about toxic masculinity, which is a real thing, and we certainly do not support it, but the vast majority of college men are not toxic. And yet they're hearing that message. So to your question, I think that this issue of community, once they find like-minded men who are part of an organization, fraternities are independent self-governing entities. They're peer-run. And so they decide what members they're going to invite into membership. They elect their own officers. They run their own organization. And through that, they learn a lot of life skills. An interesting dynamic that I've seen change. 15 years ago, college men had a lot of that experience already from growing up. Today, not so much, because I don't know, my assessment is that they haven't been given the opportunity in K through 12 to be alone with a group of other boys to figure it out. And so when they get to college, it's in many cases one of the first times that they're like, you figure it out, what do you think? You've got to work it out. And I think that's important.
I wasn't in a fraternity when I went to school, although everyone liked ATO, just to be clear. I went to University of Miami, by the way. Give me an idea of how is it that a fraternity helps foster that? Like, what are the actual things that they do?
Can I, not being in fraternity leadership, but actually belong to a fraternity, Sigma Chi, which is actually founded at University of Miami.
Oh,
Just FYI. And have been involved in my fraternity ever since, and was a big defender of fraternities on campus, one of the few Democrats that started that years ago. Look, for me, much like in Antong's situation, I didn't grow up with a father. My father was, when he was around, was not a great father. He was extremely abusive and ended up also being arrested for drugs and stuff of that nature. Going and joining a place like at Harvard, which is a very, individualistic place with a lot of people already know each other, Sigma Chi was extremely important because it helped me connect to other men who were basically already willing to accept me. There's a structure already there. It didn't matter that I didn't go to prep school. Oh, sorry. Something to speak to. It didn't matter that I didn't go to prep school. It didn't matter that I was in the same summer camps with these guys. But there was an understanding of what my values were that was aligned with the fraternity. And I joined this fraternity, and I got to meet men from all across the country with different experiences that taught me a new way of how to understand being a man in this world and my responsibility as a man. And it was done in a very safe environment that normally could go wrong, right? You can, and growing up in my kind of Latino background, you can find yourself in a community of men that can teach you some really, really bad things, but it can be masculine at the same time. And here with the structure that happens with fraternities, so you're creating a very safe environment where you're learning from other men how to be a responsible male in this world and be a member of your community. If you see of who are the leaders in a lot of our communities, a lot of them have come from these fraternities and the fraternity world. If you look at, for example, I represented the largest African American community in Congress when I was in Arizona. Most of my leaders in the black community came from the sorority system or from the Black fraternity system. And it is a great training ground that is desperately needed right now, especially because men are growing up in a very, very, very bad situation.
And I would say that everybody has each other's back in terms of if you stay in your room and don't go to class for 3 days, someone's going to knock on your
Yeah.
door and say, you need to go to class.
Right.
And we see this certainly.
Or if you're just an asshole.
Yeah, right.
Because sometimes,
absolutely,
honestly,
absolutely.
sometimes
Then you get a lot of door knocks.
Yeah,
right?
well, yeah, but sometimes,
Right.
like, you need other men to tell this young guy, this young 18, 19-year-old, hey, you were being an asshole, right?
Right.
You should not have spoken to that person that way. You shouldn't have spoken to that or treated that woman that way. You are embarrassing yourself, and you're embarrassing us as a fraternity. Like, that is also sometimes needed, especially when it comes to young men.
And the mentor piece too. So you have alumni, older men who are serving as advisors, or just even on game day when they come by. There are older men who will connect with the undergraduates. They have a connection just through the chapter that is very real. And the undergraduates typically very much look up to the alumni and are interested in what they're doing, both professionally and in their personal life.
We don't have to go through the chair if Antoine or Colonel, if you want to throw something in, please do. Otherwise, an open question for the panel, maybe one of you two guys. So these are sort of the obvious things that we're talking about. What are some of the less obvious paths to sort of foster this sense of community, this sense of belonging, this ability to bridge these different divides?
I mean, I think culturally we need to stop making men.
But how, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt. You hear things like, culturally we have to stop doing that. What does that mean?
Well, I think, I think it means on all fronts wherever we can, trying to make men the other or inherently bad, because that fosters a sense of isolationism. And I think isolation. And I think we have been moving where there is a problem with toxic masculinity. But by you inherently being masculine does not mean you are toxic, right? And I think it's gone too far, right? That if you are a masculine man or if you're a man in general, you are inherent by nature somewhat toxic. And I think that creates this horrible feedback loop that kind of creates even further and further isolation of that. And that is a function of society, it's a function of academia, it's a function of politics, it's a function of what's happening in media, right? I think the most important thing we can do is just say, hey, this is a problem, let's talk, let's figure out how to do it. Where we can do it, let's do it. But not identifying the problem is the biggest problem right there.
Antoine, you had actually said toxic masculinity earlier. Discuss that.
Yes, because I think growing up in the community that I serve, young men are taught not to have feelings, not to talk. You have to be tough. You can't show feelings. You can't show. I didn't grow up around men who would feely, touchy,
Right.
or hey, you doing good, words of affirmation. It was like as a man, we were taught that you to be a man, you got to suck it up and just figure it out. And so at some point we have to say, what does that do to the psyche of that individual, and then how that projects to the individuals that's in his care. And so for me, even for me in prison, me being able to look in the mirror and try to unlearn and undo all the stuff up until 18 years that had been imparted to me, that was a tough situation to do because other men, and I'm gonna tell you this, prison's not the place to go figure this stuff out. I didn't even realize that,
Not recommended for your personal journey, prison.
But just being vulnerable, just the idea of being vulnerable, like being in tune with who you are, your feelings, et cetera, that's not looked favorably upon. But what I found in that journey for myself was I realized that vulnerability meant strength. I had been taught that it meant weakness. And what I noticed is as I was being more vulnerable about my situation and stuff, because we all shared the same thing. All came from father's home, all dropouts, didn't graduate high school. It was a lot of key factors at play, but I think I was the first one to be very honest about it, where I'm putting my feelings on the line. And I think in essence what it did was it made other men say, it's okay to do it. It's okay to do it because, again, in the communities I was raised in, men were taught to suck it up. You can't cry, you can't tell, you can't feel, et cetera, et cetera. And
You can just be mad.
Just be a man.
That's the emotion you can show as anger.
Yes. And so undoing that, it takes a process. Like even today, like we bring men together, my organization bring men together, and we have these healing circles. And it's a lot of work, because we have grown men, I'm talking about grown men, men of color who are coming together, don't know each other, being vulnerable for the first time. And as we do the work, it's interesting to see how these men are crying, I'm talking about crocodile tears, over something that happened in their childhood. Father not being there, or something, crying, crocodile tears, but we create that space. But one thing I do notice and have learned that when you create that space for men and even boys, because we do it with boys as well, when you create that space for them, it's like it frees them, because it chops at all of these ideals of a man that's not rooted in values and principles, passion and morals and all that good stuff. And we have to constantly push that on our men and young people.
Colonel, I saw you taking some notes over there.
Well,
Share your
I
thoughts.
promise I just met the senator for the first time today, but we have a lot of the same thoughts.
Yep.
In 2003, I was sitting in a tent in Iraq, and Mail Day is a big day, right? So in the mail one day from
M-A-I-L, by the way.
Yeah.
That's a great pun, but yes.
No, sorry. That's like,
There's some,
I'm gonna-
I want to say something about that too.
So mail came, and I got a book from a mentor of mine called Wild at Heart by John Eldridge. I'm not sure if you guys have heard of it, but one of the things he talks about in that book is how our, to use the word, modern culture has tamed down men and taken away that God-given wildness and adventure and strength. And he goes on to talk about, and I'm in a tent in Iraq, talk about how a man needs a battle to fight, an adventure to live, and a beauty to rescue. And I'm no kidding, in the battle. Every day is an adventure. And I met the girl that I was going to marry shortly before I left, and I was waiting to get back, right? So I related strongly to that book. It really resonated with me. But going to the point of serving something greater than yourself. I mean, by definition, if you're serving, like for example, when the senator walks across to the Capitol, I mean, to an extent, he's reacting to contact, right? Because things come up overnight that he might have that's going to change what he does for the day. So when you're serving something greater than yourself, it's by definition going to be an adventure, right? And he fights battles. So the more we can encourage young men and men to get in the fight, so to speak, to be involved and get out of their basements. And one thing that I haven't heard mentioned a lot today of the 3 panels I've listened to is the role of the parents, right? I have 3 daughters. After there's a certain age where your effectiveness kind of wanes a little bit. You're kind of in the background. But
I got 3 daughters too. I know exactly what you're talking about.
But my wife and I, and she says, hey, if you're not going to bed tired, you're not doing it right. If you're not engaged in those kids' lives, and one of the former panel members talked about preserving that 5 to 8 o'clock, at night, being able to interact with and pour into your kids. But the parents, when COVID occurred, I moved from Texas in 2020. I was stationed at the Pentagon, and I came to a school that was shut down for a year. It was school by screen. And my oldest 2 daughters were in 7th and 8th grade. They stared at a screen. Well, when they finally went back to school, a year later, one of my daughters, because when you do something like that for a year, it creates a habit, right? It creates a negative habit that it's okay just to be in your room on a screen. Okay, we forced that, and then we normalized it. And so my wife and I had to finally say, look, you're not just going to stay in your room on a screen. You're going to play a sport. Pick one, or I'm going to pick it for you. I mean, we were that directive about it, but we had to get our kids back engaged. And I just want to challenge the parents out there, get your kids engaged in some type of activity, in some type of community, and don't let them fall to the wayside, stay in the basement, and become a statistic.
Yeah, and I just want to add, that's great stuff. I just want to add, too, make sure we say this here, in building strong male connection in age isolation. I think inherently in there we can think that we have to be perfect. And I want to address that I think giving men agency, boys agency in this new climate is the acknowledgement that none of us is perfect. Oftentimes we, as adults, we hide our flaws and our mistakes that we made. But I believe in my transparency that all of us have a part to play. All of us can contribute. I'm talking every single person, and whatever we've been through in life is medicine for someone else. And a lot of times we're ashamed of what we've been through in life. Like, I don't walk in no room feeling ashamed of the fact that I've been to prison, of my father. I don't care about that because it don't matter. I connect with the fact that I'm married to that, and I know that I can help some young man who was just like me, who was an A honor roll student, who wanted to do good, but he didn't have an individual who saw him enough and thought enough of him to say, let me take your hand and help you through this. Let me set aside some time to help you. So I'm saying to the crowd, to people that's watching, that we all have, it's no only senator is qualified. It's not that. We all are qualified by the very sure experiences that we've been through in life to give people agency and make them feel belong. Because a lot of times, if you go into a situation with this perfect idea, this perfect, you cutting people off from that at that point right there. But I think it's embracing our own struggles helps give connection and belonging and meaning to other men as well.
I do think just even doing, and I sat down with Richard Reeves actually recently, and because I've been talking about this for years, feeling like Cassandra, like shouting into the wind here. Even symbolic efforts to show that we still care about men aren't done anymore. And,
What were those?
they're none. That's the
No,
problem.
but what did they used to be?
I mean, I think before there was just like a
You got a tie for Father's Day.
Yeah, that's stuff, but it was just more of a general understanding, like, where men's role in society was, and it kind of disappeared, and we haven't really figured out how to bring back and talk about it, right? Because I think a lot of people kind of feel sheepish, and I'll give you a good example. I won't mention a name, but one of the things that I did on my campaign, and we're one of the few Senate races that did very well with men, even white men, and but especially with Latino men. And we did a lot of very male-focused outreach, right? We did boxing matches, which we had to fight even our own staff because they thought it was actually reinforcing toxic masculinity. We literally weren't actually boxing. I was literally streaming a boxing match, and we invited Latino men to come and watch it, right?
And it worked.
It worked. We did
Right,
it a couple times, and we did rodeo shows. We did lowrider shows. I mean, we did all this kind of stuff to kind of, show men that, hey, this campaign wants to talk to you. Right. And there's a lot of politicians come and ask me, like, oh, what should I be doing? I'm like, I'll give you a good example. And I couldn't do it this year because I am a recent father. My son was born June 12th. I'm number 3, which is why if you see me getting coffees, because we're going through regress. We're going through regression right now.
Well, you're going to bed tired. You're doing the job that the Colonel talked about.
And I talked to this elected official. I'm like, what you should do? I can't do it this year, but I'll do it next year. Mm-hmm. You should do a Father's Day appreciation breakfast or lunch or dinner, and just do it around your district, right? Yeah. And just invite it, throw it out there, and say, hey, thanks for being a father. Here it is. And he said, oof, I don't know about that. I'm like, why not? He's like, well, I think I'll get shit for it. I'm like, wait, can I say that? Sorry about that. Okay. Good.
You can say it on C-SPAN.
Yeah. Okay. And I said, but do you do things for mother? He's like, yes. I'm like, so why is it okay for you and socially acceptable for you to do things for Mother's Day, but not for Father's Day? When did that happen? That we can't recognize fathers for being good fathers or for being involved in their community? And how is it that we've gotten into this mindset? And I say we, this is Democrats, just to be clear, that if somehow we cherish and understand and respect fathers, that somehow it's diminishing the status of mothers. Right. They don't. Because if you actually go into the real world, if I go into my neighborhoods in Arizona, and I go talk to a working class Latina mom who is divorced and raising her kids, she's going to say, yes, I am a strong Latina woman. I am raising my son as best as I can. But she will also say, like, yes, I want him to have good father figures. I want him, like, that world does exist. Mm-hmm. Except in the political world, somehow there needs to be this, like, clear separation. And I think that's just not helpful at all. It's certainly not politically helpful, but it's not helpful to the father. It's certainly not helpful to the son, but it's also certainly not helpful to the father. And we still need good fathers in society.
Wynn, please.
Yeah, and this goes back to an earlier question in terms of what's happening in fraternity. One of the things that ATO does at the end of every meeting, everyone gets a gavel and they say whatever's on their mind, and they always end it with, and I love and respect all my brothers. It is a throwaway line, but not really. Mm. And so to emphasize this sense of brotherhood, we set up a studio and brought in 2 chapter mates. One new, he identified his chapter mate that he wanted to say he appreciated him for something, right? But we didn't tell the guy why he was coming in. So we brought him in a studio, sat him on a couch, and the guy who wanted to tell his appreciation did. And it could be for little things. There were a couple of very dramatic stories. And in every case, the reaction of the person hearing this, not knowing it was coming, was emotional appreciation, and they totally walked out of the room floating. And a very simple thing like that makes a huge difference. So if I'm a parent or if I'm a teacher or an advisor to young men, college men, it's like, okay, why don't you, Joe, tell Andres what you appreciate about him? One thing. And that has an amazing impact, and it just does not happen. We have to give men the construct to be able to do that because it's not a natural kind of thing.
Excellent. Well, I've got the 10-minute warning. And so it's question time. Okay, well, that was quick. Are we passing a microphone? How are we doing? Oh, great.
Thank you. I'm Charles Hilley with The Dispatch, and as I've been listening to these panels throughout the day, one thing that I've kind of been wrestling with is that there are certain things affecting men that are out of their control. Absent fathers, not living up to their paternal responsibilities, sort of social stigma, making men not feel all that appreciated. But as we learned in the polling presentation earlier, there are certain core things that are predominant among a lot of men in the world today who are very successful. Things like working out, things like having a group of friends, things like going to church somewhat. So, and these are all things that are within our control. So I'm just wondering how, I wanted to get all of your thoughts on this, is how we should walk this line of noting that there are certain things that are out of our control, but also ensuring that we don't get too much into a victim mentality and focusing on what we can do in our own lives, basically.
Well, I think thinking of men as an asset to society is a first thing that we as policymakers can do. There are some things we can do, right? Richard Reeves and a couple of men here talked about it, the fact that there are declining teachers that are male. That does matter. So I did not grow up with a positive male role model. I had my grandfather for a little bit before he died. I had some cousins and stuff, but it was actually the male teachers in my life that I still talk to, by the way, and some of the bosses I had in different job sites that ended up being very key to this. One of the things we could do is encourage men to be teachers. What does that look like? We should, pay more. We should pay teachers more, so that's an actual job that people do. But we should actually have incentives to encourage men to be teachers, and we should not be ashamed about that. Because we know it's better for society if there are more male teachers, because that means we have better males. If there's better males, that means all of society is better, right? That's crazy to hear, because people are like, oh, you're trying to get men to, incentivize affirmative action for men. Yeah, but it's actually important. I even had a bill a few years ago, recognized this was an issue with Latino men and black men, to encourage our HBCUs and our HSIs, historically black colleges and universities, and HSIs, Hispanic serving institutions, to give them more money to train teachers, especially male teachers, because we know, statistically speaking, if a black or Latino student sees a male teacher at some point in their progression, they have a 40 I think it's almost a 40% higher chance of them going to college. Mm-hmm. How crazy is that? What a great thing for society if all we have to do is find a way to train teacher, retain the teacher, and pay them a little extra. Imagine how much are we gaining from that? But we also have to get over this stigma as a country that we have to incentivize men joining a workforce, because it's, in some regards, it's pretty easy to say we should incentivize women joining this workforce, right? There's programs for that. We can, societally accept, black men joining the workforce, Latino men working in the workforce, gay men, whatever it is. But when we say men in general, everyone's like, ooh, sticky, right? But why? If we want the societal outcome to be a better society, 50% of the society is still male. So let's figure out how to lift them up and not have the stigma around that. So that's my step. Number two, I think the other area that people are kind of forgetting, and now as my 8-year-old son is getting more involved in sports. Sports and extracurriculars has now become a thing of the elite, right? I'm sure you guys have friends and family that have their kids and they're in summer sports and they have traveling team and everything else. The day of a kid just being able to join Little League is almost done. Even if you sucked back in the day, and I sucked at baseball, I still suck at baseball. I could go and join the Little League, but I had other boys that was around me and other coaches. Now, if you're not really good, you're not joining in these teams. So even men, even boys that want to have an opportunity for some type of mentorship outside of their father, their biological fathers, are not getting it because they're not good enough or they can't pay for it. And then even then, the coaching situation is hard because there aren't enough coaches anymore. And so I think as a society, you know what, why don't we pay coaches? Why don't we team up with the American Legion, with Pop Warner, everything else like that, and say, hey, listen, if you end up getting, if you need coaches, here, we're going to throw $1,000 at every coach you could bring in so you could just pay them. So you could start getting these male figures into these young men and women's lives, and at the same time make it a more democratic process. Because the reason, again, you're having less and less extracurricular opportunities is because there's less and less coaches, so then this continues to be something that's more and more. Again, we have to get over the stigma of actually paying for people to do coaching, right? But again, we know what the societal effect will be. It'll be massively more beneficial than trying to have a lot of incarcerations or on the other end dealing with the psychiatric side of it too.
Okay, I'll speak to that. For college men, 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds matriculating to college, parents always ask me, for obvious reasons, hey, my son is getting ready to go to college, should he check out the fraternity system? And anecdotally, I would say, yeah, you should check it out. The growing amount of research, even for first-generation students and economically disadvantaged students, the SEC just did a big study that those men benefit even more from fraternity. But Gallup, both in 2014 and 2021, did a huge study on the impact that fraternity has on college men, not only when they're in college, but for the rest of their life. And Gallup measures 5 areas of thriving. In every one of those areas, and this is not just for men, it's for women too, in every one of those areas of thriving that Gallup measures, Greek students as undergraduates and alumni for the rest of their lives were double-digit above unaffiliated students, and the study was controlled for socioeconomic, race, all those things, because people would say, oh, well, they came in privileged. Well, no, they didn't, especially on the men's side, that's true. And so now, when parents ask me, I say, you would be doing your son a disservice if you did not encourage him to at least check out the fraternity system. He may not find a good fit, and that's fine, but the research is growing and definitive that makes a huge difference in a college man's life.
I got the 3-minute warning here, so one more question and...
Oh, shoot, I forgot, it's questions.
Hit me. Oh, here's the microphone.
Hi, thank you. I love everything you're saying. Senator Gallego, I appreciate that you have a very concrete suggestion for attracting more men into the teaching profession. But for everybody else specifically, what can we do to be attracting more men into the armed services? If I went to my teenage son and I said, you should really think about joining a fraternity when you go to college, he'd roll his eyes and think I was an idiot. How are we marketing these, what we know to be very productive organizations to our young people specifically?
Yeah, quickly, I can say half of the men in ATO right now, and this is true across all fraternities, had the exact same reaction when they came to campus as freshmen. They rolled their eyes. And he just needs to be open to having someone get to know him who happens to belong to a fraternity, because he'll make a friend. So I would just not discourage him from that and not think that he's not going to join simply because he's skeptical now.
And I'll just offer real quickly for the organizations, especially the fraternity organizations, to partner with nonprofit organizations that's working in urban communities, because those young people need that pathway as well.
Colonel, we still got 2 minutes. You want to hit something?
Well, so more and more, the military is becoming a family business. If you look at the number of people that serve in the military compared to had a parent or an aunt or uncle or grandparent that served, is striking. We're in the military, the government's spending a lot of money trying to market away from that and to figure out, hey, why are these the only ones serving? So we need to get the word out, right? And it may not be for everyone, but again, if you want to have an opportunity to serve something greater than yourself, and maybe the military isn't it. Maybe it is the police force or something else that's a service type industry to start off. And was one of the last question about somebody say about working out or habits or I just want to answer that too. When we look at what does your day-to-day routine look like? It's easy to get like in all the the things that lead to isolation, right? The slump, the depression, loneliness, etc. there's a tremendous benefit, this is my chance to plug, like working out, right? Because it's not just about the physical fitness, right? When you're working out, you're strengthening your mind, you're reducing stress, you're helping your emotions, you're building confidence, and that's what young men need to be doing to go to a gym, go get out, go work out, go meet people, fight against isolation. Just encourage these guys to get out and do stuff that keeps them from being alone and falling into those negative habits that were discussed in some of the previous panels.
Hit the time right on the head. It's 1:45, folks. Appreciate everyone coming. Thank you very much. And I'd like to thank the panel. A round of applause.